Hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning.
Good afternoon, Sridhar. So welcome everyone to this session. Our session today is on open scholarship and data practices in the Global South. For those that have been tuned in since the beginning of the day, this is the next session. I'd like to start with introducing myself. I am Oaiya. I work for WACREN. WACREN is the West and Central African Research and Education Network. So my background is actually in the NREN sector, but recently we have been working with open science through an initiative called LibSense, which builds communities in in Africa to support open science services. So at some point later in the session, I will provide some more context so that I can add an African perspective to the session that we have today. So without further ado, I will introduce some of the speakers. The topic essentially wants to explore the state of open access and open research in developing countries. So we have a number of speakers from India, Indonesia, and who I will introduce in a minute. So the first speaker in Brazil, the first speaker will be Professor, just a minute, I need to be able to read that properly. Claudia Medeiros from the University of Campinas. She's a professor of computer science. She conducts research in open science and scientific data management, especially with challenges associated with data heterogeneity and complexity. She's a coordination member of the e-Science and Data Science program at the Sao Paulo Research Foundation. I'm sure she will fill the gaps in her presentation as well. From Bangladesh, we have Susmita Das, who is the Principal Documentation Officer of the Bangladesh Agricultural Research Council. So the agency she works for coordinates agricultural research and knowledge management systems in Bangladesh. Her PhD was focused on the effect of ICT development in agricultural production systems, and she belongs to quite a number of groups: Agri-Archive, the Open Government Data Portal, and a library association. The other speaker we will have is Sridhar Gutam, who is a senior scientist in the Indian Institute of Horticultural Research. So he's an agricultural research service scientist, and his PhD is in plant physiology. His area of interest is linked to plant physiology and open data and open science in agricultural research. He's also linked to different groups: Classical, Agri-Archive, India Archive, and Redalic America. Our last speaker for this session is Sulaiman. She's a research data librarian from the National Research and Innovation Agency from Indonesia. She is particularly interested in how research data management supports open science in the broader innovation ecosystem. She manages the National Scientific Repository in Indonesia and has extensive experience providing support for research projects. So she's currently a PhD student in the Information Studies at the University College London with a focus on research data management. So we're going to have these speakers come in one after the other with their different talks. And while that's ongoing, we would like you to put any questions that you might have in the chat or using the Q&A, or put the questions in the Q&A mostly, and use the chat as we can. So some of the kind of questions that we'll be interested in this context, because it's developing countries, is relating it to your own experiences, comment on what you hear the speakers talk about in the chat, whether it's the same or different in your experience, and whether you sort of, and where you can, provide similar scenarios or options that might mitigate challenges that they express. So without further ado, Claudia, are you ready to start?
Yes. So just let me, can I start presenting my slides?
Yes, you can, Claudia.
So let me share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
If you just move into slide mode.
Yeah, that's what, because depending on where I click, things go crazy, okay? So, well, it's good morning here, but I know it's at any time, anywhere. So good, whatever, to everybody who's here. And thank you very much for invitation to participate in this wonderful session. I'm going to talk about some initiatives of open science in South America. And I'd like to thank, of course, OASPA's committee and Bernie, who's been a great help. And whatever I'm going to show you is part of what I have learned within the Research Data Alliance, in which I am a council member, and also through serving as a co-coordinator of open science within FAPESP. Just to contextualize, I'm going to talk about South America, but it's very diverse, 12 countries, and most have already started initiatives towards open science. However, in most cases, it's just national plans with just starting implementations. And in Brazil, we have two levels. One is top-down, the government plan that is dictating some initiatives in some states. And there's also bottom-up, both from institutions and at the state level, coordinated by this funder I talked about. And just to establish the context, so everybody understands or what my context for open science, this is from a report for UNESCO that I coordinated in 2020, which describes the open science ecosystem. And it's researchers, it's people, okay, who work around research, but it's mostly researchers all over the world exchanging research outputs and research activities. And through this exchange, they reuse and repurpose the outputs, but they also reuse the methodologies. And by doing so, they improve whatever is happening in terms of activities, methodologies, and outputs. And within and around this ecosystem, you have guiding principles, you have practices on how to practice open science, you have beneficiaries, science, technology, society as a whole. You have enabling factors such as education, capacity building, funding, which is very important, facilitators such as legislators, funders. Afterwards, you will, I have the link to the report, so you can look it up afterwards. And notice that here on this side, there is the computational infrastructure. So not only does this show the open science ecosystem, but it also has one particularity, is that unlike most views of open science, it's centered on people and values and principles. And the necessary computational infrastructure is just one component. So that when I talk about open science, I talk of it at both ends, the people end and what is happening, and the barriers and challenges, and the computational end. And so this is my context of open science. And it's defined, or it can be defined as a collaboration process through sharing research outputs and processes that are in repositories. And researchers collaborate by reading each other's papers that are in repositories, but they also collaborate through data, through software that's being shared. And this is the implementation, the computational implementation part. The repositories, the network, the collaboration, and this double arrow shows that this is a two-way road. As you collaborate through computational infrastructure, you change the way IT professionals are nowadays designing communication and repositories to facilitate open science. And this is one of the things that is happening right now in South America, which is the great increase in the creation of open institutional repositories, where open papers are published, where open data are published, where open software are shared. And this, in a sense, open science is based on IT implementation, and it is changing the way IT is being thought of all over the world, but this is very visible in South America. So this is another view, results and processes in repositories for sharing and reuse, publications, a huge factor that is causing a revolution, open access in the world because of costs, maintenance, and everything. Open data, open software, and open hardware specification. But this is the computational part. What is the people part? People, in fact, are at the center of open science, and they are the key, and they interact in this overall scenario. This is my open science scenario. So to establish the context, because I'm not going to talk so much about papers and publications, but much more about the whole set of things: data, papers, hardware specifications, and software, and what is happening in South America. So these little red balls show some of the countries in which open science is now being practiced. Yesterday, I was in Argentina in a meeting of 20 presidents of academies of science in the Americas, okay? And thus, I bring you fresh news as of yesterday of the state of open science in South America. And what is the state? It's very widespread and developing in several places in Brazil, a little bit in Argentina and Colombia and Chile and Uruguay, a little bit less in Bolivia, Ecuador and Peru, and almost nothing anywhere else. Oh yeah, Colombia is there, okay? So the benefits that we are already feeling is knowledge dissemination, collaboration, which is wonderful, but it's very hard. New partnerships are being established among South American researchers and among them and the rest of the world. And there is the benefit of the two-way road in which South American countries are changing the way they plan and create repositories towards open science. The challenges we face in South America, but they are world challenges as well. First of all, is understanding that open science is not restricted to publications and papers. There is lots of complication on publishing data and documenting data or software for reuse. And this poor understanding is whenever we start talking here to other colleagues in South America about open science, they understand and immediately grasp the issues around publications. But there's still very little being done on data and software, whereas within open science, publications, data, software, and yes, hardware specifications are equal in terms of being first-class citizens. And as I showed you, we have 12 countries in South America. So there is, and within each country, there's very many divides, let us say, of technological, financial, cultural, legal, and even political issues that must be circumvented in order to have and foster open science. Now, in terms of open access, which is publications, I would like to point out Cielo. It's an infrastructure of 1,600 open access journals, covers 16 countries, including South Africa. It started in Brazil with 50,000 documents, which are journal papers, okay? It's dedicated to journals. Per year, 40 million accesses per month. And now there are Cielo preprints as of last year and Cielo data as of 2020. And then there is La Referencia, which covers open access scientific publications in Latin America. And while Cielo started in 1997, La Referencia 2010, it has nodes in all countries in South America, but covers some countries in Latin America as well. And this is now being extended to data. So we have these statistics and these accesses on publications in South America. And these are, in Cielo, these are refereed open access journals. Open data. Data, I should say, is my research field. In most countries in South America, there are already national policies and regulations, including data privacy laws. And there are initiatives that are now being implemented at individual universities in these 5 countries, plus Brazil, so it's 6 countries, with the creation of institutional data repositories in all these countries. They also have publication repositories. And in Brazil, unlike the other countries, there are national level policies, but there are state level policies. And open software, open code is just in some domains: physical sciences, health sciences, and computer science. So the big challenge, and this again is open science, not only in South America, is that when you publish papers or data or software in repositories, you are sharing and collaborating with the world, and sometimes, and very often, with people who have not been born yet. So when you prepare a paper, it will be read during 50 years, 100 years. When you prepare a data set, you have to imagine that this data set of this software are going to be reread and reused by people who you have never met and will never meet because they are not born. So let me finish by showing you an initiative I coordinated of establishing a network of open research data repositories at the São Paulo state, in which during 3 years, there were 100 people working to set up data repositories in these public universities, serving 48 campi and 200,000 researchers and students. And it was inaugurated right before COVID. And it's working, and this is a federation, which means that each of these big universities has its own data repository that's administered independently, but they all connect via a common interface. I'm finishing, okay? So a few remarks that each of these participants created their own policies. Each participant in the network has its own committee that manages the repository. And we did several tests until the inauguration. So maybe I should stop here, right? What do you think, Omo?
Oh, if you can round up in a minute.
Okay, so I have the recommendations. Okay, yeah. So think of someone commented at the beginning of the session that papers are living beings. Papers live, data lives, okay? And so there should be internal steering committees to manage and coordinate these things. And the challenges, the technological challenges are not as big as the people challenge and the funding challenge, because it's not only the computing infrastructure that has to work. People, there are big cultural and legal barriers, okay? So the challenges are cultural, they are educational, there's lack of knowledge, and we can discuss this during the rest of this panel. Thank you so much. That's obrigada in Portuguese.
Obrigado, Claudia.
Oh, great Portuguese. I'll mute.
Thank you very much. So now we would move on to Madiareni Sulaiman for the Indonesian equivalent of that presentation.
Okay, hello, well, thank you, Omo and OASPA committee. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good night from every part of the world. First and foremost, thank you for having me. I will try to share my screen and talk with my camera off for good connection. I hope you don't mind, so I will try to share it first. I hope you can see it. Omo, is it good?
Yes, it is visible, Reni. Please go on.
Thank you, Omo. Well, my name is Madiareni Sulaiman, but you can call me Reni. And at BRIN Indonesia, I work as a research data librarian. It is a government-sponsored research facility. I also manage RIN Dataverse, Indonesia's only research data repository. It is a national facility and one of the open facilities that we offer in Indonesia. Today, I would like to share an update from Indonesia on the state of the open science movement, which is still ongoing. I would also like to discuss how Indonesia in general implements open scholarship and data practices in the research and innovation environment. So Indonesia, officially the Republic of Indonesia is called, is a country in Southeast Asia and Oceania between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. It consists of over 17,000 islands, including Sumatra, Java, Sulawesi, and parts of Borneo and New Guinea. We are the world's largest archipelagic state and the 14th largest country by area. With over 275 million people, Indonesia is the world's fourth most populous country and the most populous Muslim majority country. Java, the world's most populous island, is home to more than half of the country's population. In terms of R&D or innovation, these countries have pledged to significantly increase public and private R&D spending, as well as the number of researchers by 2030. As part of the SDGs movement or Sustainable Development Goals. However, as the statistic and figures on the slide show, our GDP last year was around 1.19 trillion, but our R&D expenditure was only 0.28%. The disparity between Indonesia's size as a big country and its R&D expenditure is quite large. As a result, we must accommodate the funding itself as investment in order to improve our R&D performance. And Indonesia is among the top 3 countries in terms of the number of open access journals. And in recent years, EISSN registration in Indonesia have increased in comparison to printed ISSN registration. We have more than 11,000 open access index in ROAAD and ISSN portal. And while we are on the subject of the Global South, I would like to show you a very interesting drawing created by Dasapta Erwin Irawan, which he presented at Goethe Institute and IFLA webinar last year. He is an open science enthusiast who runs an archive and an Indonesian preprint repository. Through his drawing, he conveyed a specific message. There is a central perk. When people from the global north want to go to the south to see unique and exotic things, whereas people from the global south want to go to the north to see better things, then why don't we just meet at Central Park? Here is that it is open to all nationalities and does not have a virtual wall of standards like it should be in a top journal, blind review, citation, age index, APC, and so on. It rerouting the course of knowledge distribution. So let's see the implementation of the open science in Indonesia. To support the jargon of open science, knowledge for all, Indonesia has been working on open access initiative since early 2000, beginning with digitizing our research record. Then in 2008, we began digitizing all scientific journals and articles that were previously printed. ISGD, Indonesian Scientific Journal Database, and Open Access Journal Repository were introduced in 2010. We then launched the first data repository, RDIP, in 2012, but later renamed it as a research data repository and depository in 2014. We attempted to deliver the initiatives under national regulation in 2015. So we drafted its policy brief, which included designing programs for researchers to improve their RDM literacy skills. Then in 2016, we created the BRIN Data First prototype and established our own institutional regulation requiring the deposit of research data and its outputs. In addition, we held our first workshop on open data and RDM. We proposed the importance of BRIN Data First as a national scientific repository to the Indonesian Ministry of Regulation in 2018, and it was finally upgraded to the National Law number 11/2019 on the National System of Science and Technology, specifically in Article 40, details the mandatory deposit to preserve research data in Indonesia. So in the last 3 years, we have grown the number of data sets in our repository, which is used by our R&D institutions throughout Indonesia. And the global partners, global collaboration are critical not only for research, but also for improving and bringing our human resources up to global standards, particularly in the field of advanced science and its related applications, where extremely advanced knowledge and skills are required. So using open platform, we are establishing a collaboration hub and enabler. We support open science not only through open infrastructure, but also through dialogue by enabling our researchers to be innovators and deliver their expertise. So what kind of the open platform that we have? It is delivered through ELSA, the scientific services, as a one-stop station. So if you can see, this is we provide laboratories and other research services. We have like 500 labs, equipments, and 50 machines that can be used publicly. It includes the facilities for testing, analysis, measurement, and calibration, equipment and machinery, and also production, and also non-research facilities like our data repository, Medeiros, and also Rujukan. It is home of scientific journals that provide free hosting for open journal system, and also BRIN archive. It is a community-led digital archive for unpublished preprints. And also we provide consultation and tutoring, and also other facilities like HPC or supercomputing. And Medeiros is also indexed by RITRI data, and it is the only data repository known to us in Indonesia, whereas others are mostly about the most common institutional repository that store publish articles. And then in Indonesia, we have some policies that support our practices of open scholarship and open data, particularly in the research and innovation ecosystem. At the UNESCO Intergovernmental Meeting, here are some Indonesian delegates drafting the recommendation on open science. And I also one of the team members that was led by Mr. Hendro Subagio, our head of Center for Data in Information in BRIN, Indonesia. And because we also have the national law, Indonesian law number 11, 2019, about national system for science and technology. So in here, in Article 40, the central government stipulates that it is mandatory to deposit all primary data and the output of research. And it is referred to and need to be carried out by funders, science and technology human resources, and also institutions. And this detail about the primary data and the outputs that need to be stored or deposited. And the next regulation is under BRIN regulation, our research institution, number 18/2022, about mandatory deposit. And it's not only be needed to be done by our BRIN people, but also for foreign parties who work with BRIN are also obliged to do deposit primary data and the output of research. And here at the UNESCO, about open data in Indonesia, because we also support open data. Here, I want to clarify the regulation of open data that we have in Indonesia. I use the comparison of research data and open data from the Australian government, which clearly defines its differences. For research data, we follow the principles of fair data. And for open data, we have special policy under Presidential Regulation number 13, 2019 about One Data Indonesia. As you can see from the figure, it's not only regulate about statistical data and its custodians, but also spatial data and etc. And in 2011, Indonesia joined 7 other countries in establishing the International Organization Open Government Partnership, or OGP, and reaffirmed its commitment to an open government data strategy. So the country passed the presidential regulation on Satu Data Indonesia, or One Data Indonesia, in 2019, making it a policy imperative to pursue open government data strategy at the national and subnational levels. So here, as you can see, we have like a standardized data, metadata, and interoperability, and also its reference codes that have their own stakeholders, include the producers like government agencies, research institutes, civil society organizations, and our users, private sectors, citizens, and community and media. So our next agenda are, we won't stop with open access only, but also with open science, which includes citizen science, a repository of communal intellectual property, like indigenous knowledge, and more reproducible research. We also want to have more open infrastructure for public use. And of course, we support UNESCO recommendation on open science in the more national scale implementation. And for open data, our Indonesian government has demonstrated a consistent commitment to increasing government transparency, research innovation, and community engagement. Currently, the central and local governments are collaborating on data integration across the country with the goal of transforming Indonesia into a world-class government by 2024. Data will be freely available to all data consumers once data sets are integrated on a single unified national platform. So I hope this presentation could help you to have more updated information regarding the state of Indonesia's open science implementation. And I will give the floor back to Omar. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Rennie. It was actually very nice to see in the chart that Indonesia is the country with the most journals indexed in DOAJ. So that's really impressive. So thank you for that insight into Indonesia. We will now move on to Bangladesh with Susmita. Susmita, are you ready? You're muted at the moment. Excellent.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you very much for bringing me here. And before sharing my screen, I would like to thank you, the organizer, very much for giving me this opportunity. And I'm really delighted and grateful to be here as panelist, to being the very brilliant panelist among one of panelists. And I'm now going to start my sharing my slide. I think and so
Thank you.
it's okay, kind of.
Yes, it's very fine, Susmita. You can proceed.
Thank you very much, sir. And welcome to my presentation, Data and Information Access in Bangladesh, some issues, challenges, and success. This is actually general information about Bangladesh. Population is now based on 21st September 2021, and it is the 168 billion. And Bangladesh population is equivalent to 2.11% of the total world population and ranks number 8 in the list of countries and others developing population. And the total land area is 170 kilometer, like 50,259 square miles. And our population's 39.4% of the population is urban, and density in Bangladesh is 1,265 per kilometer, or 3,277 people. Nice. And what will happen in 2050? Presently, Bangladesh GDP is sound good, USD 536 billion PPP, and rank is 31 in such list. And PricewaterhouseCoopers, they predict that Bangladesh rank would be 23 in terms of GDP and of USD 3,367 billion. And it is 5.28 times in increase of 2014. But many economists open that PwC is projecting but non-predicting. But we are believing that turning the projection into a reality would be difficult, but nonetheless achievable. And this is the scenario of digital Bangladesh. And digital Bangladesh is our government's vision and very dream of Bangladesh. And so Bangladesh Telecom Regulatory Commission, we have it is established in 2015, and after 3G services are launched in 2013, internet penetration grew accordingly 22% by 2021. And its growth rate is 3% per month. Actually, we are really blessed. Our Bangladesh is becoming digitalized very smoothly, because during COVID-19 lockdowns, we observed digital Bangladesh played a key role in ensuring service continuity in healthcare and education, commerce and trade, social safety, net payments for the new poor, grievance, redress, and whatever else you can imagine. So, and this is the internet users scenario. There are 52.58 million internet users in Bangladesh in January 2022. Bangladesh internet penetration rate is stood at 31.5% of the total population at the start of 2021, and the number of internet users in Bangladesh increased by 7.7 million between 2020 and 2021. And social media users in Bangladesh is also very fastly growing. There are 49.55 million social media users in Bangladesh in January 2021, and the number of social media users in Bangladesh increased by 9.9 million between 2020 and 2021. And the number of social media users in Bangladesh at the start of 2022 was equivalent to 29.7% of the total population. And we have many challenges. Establishing open data, open access research publishes, and open data government, Bangladesh government align with Digital Bangladesh for establishing Digital Bangladesh smoothly. Bangladesh government also opened data portal, open data portal with the vision to data for all, and this is the objectives, like to encourage developing innovative solutions for better public service delivery, to enhance the scope of research to identify and develop innovative solutions, to create opportunities for new jobs and more investment, to make government more transparent and accountable. This is the data.gov.bd, Bangladesh Open Data Portal. And access to data information is really critical for bringing out the change in the world we live. And globally, we know open data movement is gaining momentum. In this view, Bangladesh government also established the Open Government Data Portal, OGD. Bangladesh Open Data is, this is the web address is http://data.gov.bd. And it is the initiative by the Prime Minister's Office, A2I, under the Access to Information Program, and to support Sustainable Development Goal SDG 16 to promote peaceful, inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice, and build effective and accountable and inclusive institutions at all levels. And it is supported by UNDP, USAID, and UND. But it is our regret that the total data set is still in open government data. It's really very poor, and you see the scenario, it is very less and very poor still, but we believe we can overcome it by establishing some policy. And this is the data set scenario. And Malaysia open data sharing, some principles we have. Data shall be made easily accessible. Data shall be made available for co-creation. Data shall be released in a timely manner. Data shall be shared in machine readable format, and data shall be as raw as possible. Though we have some challenges, but we have good success also. And Bangladesh government has very good, wonderful program. This is Access to Information, A2I, Aspire to Innovate, a multinational digital transformation catalyst from the government of Bangladesh. And it is a key driver of the nation's goal of becoming a developed country, assuming the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. And making data available on the web for public use for the better public service, delivery, research, new job opportunities, investment, and transparency and accountability in the government. This is the vision of A2I. And to encourage the development innovative solution for better public, to enhance the scope of research, to create new job opportunities and investments, and to make government more transparent, accountable. I already explained, and it is the goals to embed open data practice in the government, to engage with the open data community, and to increase the generation of demand-driven open data. We have Bangladesh journals online that we call Banglajal, and it is managed and developed by Bangladesh Academy of Sciences. Still, we have 166 journals. There are 1,750 tables of 1,750 tables of contents listing and articles, and 1,628 of the articles are available in full text. According to Scientific Bangladesh Science Magazine, Bangladesh now crossed 10,000 milestone of science publication in 2021. More than 11,000 scientific publications in 2021 are in the Scopus database that are taken on 6 January, with at least one author with Bangladesh affiliation. This number is 3,000 more than the number 2021 found in first week of January 2020. And this is the publication subject matter, and with so this medicine medical science journals dominated all the subjects. It is 14,510, and after that, computer science, biology, chemistry, and this is here this according to www.lens.org. Actually, access to information we have, but can access to information be extended for open science? This is now the vital questions, and it is already working for open education and open data. If open access to scholarly research is added to the access to information, we can enable environment for open science can be created. I believe that And it is our geo that means Bangladesh. We have Open DRS is helping building open data sharing platform. This is geo-dash.gov.pd for understanding risks and vulnerability of natural hazards of Bangladesh, and it is mapped about 8,500 buildings and 93 kilometers of roads and highways. Data analysis and technical consulting firm of Bangladesh, founded in 1994, and by people formerly employed by the International Food Research Institute in its food policy projects, supporting to find solutions to various processing social and economic challenges in Bangladesh, encourages duplication of these materials for non-commercial purposes. International support, we have Gutam Global Open Data for Agriculture, joining the global efforts of open data in agriculture and nutrition. Gutam as partners from Bangladesh, Bangladesh government, Bangladesh Agriculture Research Council, Bangladesh Institute of ICT and Development, BIID, WIPAR, Bangladesh Enterprise Humanity. All those we are struggling for establishing open data, open access, open research. And IPRI, they have very good number of publications, data. Bangladesh Integrated Household Survey, BISH 2015, and Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index, SCI Bangladesh Database 2015, Bangladesh Climate Change Adaptation Survey, Food Policy Research Capacity, Cereal Systems Initiative for South Asia, Bangladesh Integrated Household Survey, Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index, Pilot for Bangladesh, Chronic Poverty and Long-Term Impact Study in Bangladesh, Comparing Food versus Cash for Education Program in Bangladesh, Impact Evaluation of Food for Education Program in Bangladesh, Bangladesh Shahar Dinas Food Baseline Survey, etc. National Agriculture Research System in Bangladesh, where I'm working now. Collaboration with international institutions, organization have developed valuable research outputs and the data associated with the outputs. And these very important data sets needs to be curated, cataloged, and shared for among the NARS stakeholders using appropriate policies and technologies. Establishing of the Open Agriculture Data Portal for Bangladesh, it is very necessary to help the researcher in understanding the research better formulate new development projects related to agriculture. And very recently, we are working with CABI, and we are developing one proposal that CABI, they want to host our data set, and we are now negotiating with the CABI. It is not yet settled, but we hope we can develop some strategy where our NARS scientists can deposit their data, and so that other scientists can share it accordingly. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patient sharing. Any questions? Any questions, any queries? I'm happy to answer you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Susmita. The open data portal that you talked about in Bangladesh, there's some work that's ongoing in Africa. I would sort of talk a little bit more about that after Sridhar's presentation. But I've seen some interesting comments in the chat about the political context in which we all come from in the global south and the difference with funding. I'm sure that's going to be something to talk about after Sridhar's presentation. So Sridhar, please give us the insights from India.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you, my co-panelists, Susmita, Claudia, and the firm. Madiareni, sorry, I'm pronouncing wrong. And thank you, the host, Ospa, and today's moderator, Umo, for giving this opportunity to share some of my thoughts on what's happening and from the history and the current things. and being is a global panel, South panel, and I should mention the support of the Latin America, which they are doing wonderful, and we are getting inspired from the Indonesia, and we India and Bangladesh going together and learning more issues and challenges about that, how to address that. Me and Susmita share agriculture, same NER systems, India and Bangladesh. And the preprints we are learning from the Indonesia, and the non-commercial open access platforms we are learning from the Latin America, America. So I'll use some of my slides to put a discussion on the what I wanted to say. Hope my slides are visible. Yeah. Open science in India is the one. Now we have come from a open access towards open science, and now this is being discussed and trying the stakeholders from the government, community, the researchers, and the librarians, and everybody is now working towards this. And so many NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and community of practices in India, they all coming and putting their efforts to to have a enabling environment for improving the access to data and scholarship under the open science umbrella. And to say about some little bit of the history, how we started, and I could capture some of the landmarks on the open access movement, and now going towards open science. The historical mandate was the NIT Rourkela, which has adopted the open access mandate and making the first in the country to have this and to start a repository of the open access repository. And it was followed by before the 2006. Sir was working as a consultant there, so he is the person who brought the talk on the open access in India when the Budapest Open Access Initiative was started. And after that, 2 years later, in 2004, 2 workshops were conducted in India, one at Bengaluru, one at Delhi, and that has sown the seeds for the open access movement. And we are progressing, but I should agree here and that it's a slow progress. But nevertheless, we are moving towards the open access and open science. So after the mandate, and there was then 2009 was another big landmark. It was like a decision by the University Grants Commission to mandate all the PhD MPhil thesis in a open access repository. And it was also at the same time the National Knowledge Commission has recommended for the creation of OERs, Open Educational Resources, and in 2013 only there was a repository started. Meanwhile, the 2 organizations, the CSIR, Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, and Indian Council of Agricultural Research, both have adopted the open access policy, mandating the researchers to deposit the open access outputs in the open access repositories, including the data. Then the fundless policy has come in 2014, where the DBT DST has put up its policy, and but while we don't have a national policy, we wanted to have a national policy like other countries. Even now Indonesia, they have a policy, but we couldn't succeed it at the time. But the councils and the other organizations were having, and the communities have come into place to play a picture. And the first preprint repository for agriculture has started by the community called Open Access India, to which I am engaged. I work as a convener there. Then we also had a Delhi Declaration Open Access by the same community with other communities working for the open access in India. Then the thesis repository, which was mandated in 2009, was made into existence, and Shodhganga was born with the rules and regulations of 2016 of the mandate of UGC. But in 2018, they have started adopting the open licensing, though it's not a free license, but it is Creative Commons license was added to that. And following the updates from the Indonesia, we got inspired and we started the India preprint repository. I'll come into the next slides, like how the preprints are going in India. We see that towards open science, if preprints repository is going, or the records are going in the repositories, means we are going towards the open science. Probably we can measure the open science progress through the repository of preprints, because we feel and we understand that when a researcher is putting the preprints in a repository, it means that he's opening up of the first drafts without any hesitation, to show to the world about his research, his or her research, and to share the research knowledge outputs with the data and information to the public immediately. So that is the first step towards this, and the open access journals or repositories will be followed later on. But we see that we should measure the progress of open science through the preprint repository population. Then in 2020, we have Science Technology Innovation Policy, which is still in the draft, but they talk about the more enabling environment, though it has not promulgated as a national policy, but it is as still is in a draft condition. And when we look at this, when this is happening, we wanted to see how the progress of open science through the publication of open access articles are going. So we see that though it is growing, though the momentum is increased, but it has dipped and then it started taking up. But still there is a gap between the closed access. We have to bridge that gap. And how the researchers and the other people are coming into the picture and working towards this full open access, we will be seeing in this. And when most of our researchers, either they want to publish in the Web of Science index journals or Scopus index journals, because we have been given ratings, or the framework of ranking is based only on these two largest repositories of the abstracting and indexing agencies, databases. But more people are interested to go for Scopus because it's the largest database. And there were many research studies of the bibliometrics, and one of this, which I'm just quoting here, is for a reason, but this paper is behind the paywall, and it says that only 12% of publications are published in open access journals. So this huge gap is still there, and when we talk about open access also, the paper is put on the paywall. The reasons are article processing charges. There is no push for the society journals. So I'll come in the next, like when talk about the DOAJ index journals. But the scholarly societies which are in forefront in taking forward the research is not being given a much more importance. But the Science Technology Innovation Policy has taken that into consideration. They have put up a policy that they are going to be given a more facelift, and also the support for making competing with the other commercial publishers. See, as from the SGR, we could see the open access output as not reached up to the 50% level. Under the circumstances, how the researchers are trying to bridge the gap. As per the DBT DST policy, the two one central repository was Science Central Repository was started for the labs of the in institutes or the which have been funded by the DBT DST. DBT is Department of Biotechnology, and DST is Department of Science and Technology, both under the Ministry of Science and Technology. It's a funders policy. So we could see that the open access is still not met. Means though we have the policies, we have the mandates, but still we couldn't go. And from the 2006 to 2002, we have only few of the repositories, not more than 128 repositories in India as per the registry of open access repositories. Means though it is growing, but it's not growing into the full pace or the momentum as it is going, because it is not going, and we may have some issues in the like, as the first speaker was saying, like the open access, open science has larger thing, not only the access to the publications, but the data and data mining. So in the absence of those things at a one central locus or a central repository or a harvested repository, we cannot go much deeper into the understanding of the existing knowledge to bring out the new knowledge. And I say, like, the preprints are growing, but the most popular is through the bioarchive and medarchive. And from the last few years, we could see how many of them has been deposited through the lens.org. More than 5,520 deposits are there in the only those major preprint repositories. And yes, as the graph shows, it is growing, and it is, but I don't know why there is a dip in this. The reasons we need to be finding it out. And as I say, that DOAJ, Directory of Open Access Journals, Indonesia is on the top, and India was also earlier, but there was some kind correction was done, and we've been asked to resubmit. And as of now, it stands at 315 index journals, and more than like 230, like more, almost all of them doesn't have any article processing charges. But what is the output, means the publications into these journals is less. Why? Because most of them may not be having the impact factor, because all the researchers have been judged their progress is through the impact factor repositories. And the repositories also, it's not going, it is up only at the 128, because DOR and ROR has given two different data, but I am taking the 128 is the institutional repositories. Coming to the education part, many of the initiatives under the Department of Education, Ministry of Education, has taken some policies to bring all the textbooks of the published by the NCERT, National Council of Education Research and Training, to online, and anybody can download it and share it as it is. And they have taken a license, which for us, maybe we can we can relate it to the CC by NC-ND, which is again not open, not a free license. But nevertheless, the textbooks have taken onto the web. Now from the print only to the read online. But these OERs was the recommendation, but OERs have not been coming to the much more as it is wanted to be by the commission. And there is another initiative called from the Inflib Lab. It is called EPG Pathashala. Pathashala means school, and this is for the for the school undergraduates or the +2 level, and this is for the PG postgraduate level. Most of all the content have been developed by the course coordinators spread across the country who are on the faculty. They were assigned to they were asked to design the courseware to be adopted onto the online. Mostly everything was made into the PDFs. Probably in the days to come, it will be taken into the multimedia in the sense where the more module kind of can be developed. And there is a massive open courses also being developed, and these are all called under the Swayam is the one platform. And we have a national digital library, which what it is taking, it's harvesting all the data which has been put at the different repositories. So now through this one portal, any of the person without registration can access the content. For some, it may be registration is required. For most of the thing, it is not it is open for anyone. But again, it is not a central repository. It's only harvesting. It is a harvested. It links to the full text or the other material which is available on the other sites. Here also there is no open license, and not everybody can, use it as they wish or under the free license kind of thing. It is all under the copyright protection. But there are open access repository being also added to that. So there people can use it. And the Shodh Ganga, which I was talking about, Thesis Repository, which is having more than 3 lakhs, near about 4 lakhs thesis. This is all under the open access, where the under the Creative Commons license, people can download, share, but non-commercial and no derivatives. But this is a repository, but those files are under different files have been added. It's not into one single file. For some of the cases, it may be good to have a different files because users can download what is required. But the search interface is also there. But data mining will be an issue, as somebody has put up in some of the talks, that these repositories are not catering to the data mining part. So this is the one challenge has to be taken up by the community itself, to how to make it more eco-friendly, more data mine friendly kind of thing. And the largest repository for the agriculture has been also established, and Krishi Kosh is again a thesis repository, but contrary to the Shodh Ganga, which has a open license to download and share, this repository will only allow the users to read online. If you want to save a thesis, you cannot save it. It's only you have to read it. Here also, the full text data mining is also not possible, though all files are put up as together as a single file, but being a PDF, so there is a issue in, like, you cannot search across the methodologies. Suppose a thesis has done on biotechnology, thesis have been done on the marker analysis, and if you want to know the methodology across the thesis, you cannot get it. You can only read the thesis individually. And we have the data.gov.in for us, like Bangladesh. This is also coming up and creating a more enabling, in the sense, not only now they are getting the data from the government agencies like the ministries, now they are going to open up for even the researchers. They themselves can contribute their data into this as a research data, or any of the community or any of the entities in India, even private, public, even private people, the business people, or who are into the for-profit, or they can also put their data and also use the data at free of cost. And all the data is available under the royalty-free, non-exclusive license. It is the government open data license, which the government of India is using it. And that's what now the data will be changing into the new data platform, in which it will be the one-stop destination to discover, harvest, and register data from the participating data exchanges or registries. It may be individuals or agencies. That's how they are going to make it. But it is only about the data. And the preprint repository, we wanted to have it. There were some issues, and then the India archive was stopped, and again now it has taken on, like it started again, thanks to the open journal systems. Open preprint software has been given. CLO was the first to test it, and they were partnering developing that. Indonesia is using this, and the India is also using it. This is the India archive repository. Unfortunately, not much of the progress we have achieved, but because probably the brand building or the, I don't know the reasons for the least population, but BioArchive and Medarchive are growing, and the Indian repository is not growing. So this is one worrisome for the people who are behind these initiatives, and to bring more people into the like preprinting. So the ASA Bio as partner, like we were partnering with the ASA Bio to create a environment where the researchers will be given been exposed for the preprinting better things from the preprints, and also to bring that preprints in the research assessment framework. Unless that is not taken, the most of the researchers are not going to preprint it. So to have the open science, preprinting is the best. So first entry point, you can say, this has been done, and still there is discussions are happening, and people are aware of this kind of initiatives. And now we are talking about the publications and all these things, science, but before have the science to happen, there should be a linkage between the resources and the researchers, thinking that the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India has taken up this initiative called the iSTEM, where this is going to help the researchers across the country to get the access to the research instruments spread across the in India. People can book the instrument and then go and work, or they can send their samples to get it done, or they can just go and hands-on experience also can be done. So this is being more pushed, and many of the researchers have come up, and all the institutions in India has put up the database on this iSTEM platform, showcasing their instrumentations, and also giving the calendar of like availability, all these things. Now this is being taken by everybody, and this STIP policy which I was taking, though it is still under draft, we soon expect that to be put as a gazette or published as a national policy. This talks about the open science, and this is being done when the open science draft by the UNESCO is being discussed. And the similar lines, STIP was also going on, and it has a huge consultations in India and abroad, and the India diaspora was also contributed to this. In this, I have just taken some of the recommendations. It is going, and overall the STIP policies to promote open science, and especially under the open access, they want to have the postprints and preprints repositories to be made. And because of this policy, probably the institutions will allow the thesis researchers to submit their papers to this preprint repositories. And also these Indian journals will be given a more push to this, visible, to make more globally visible globally. This is being taken only to cut short the fake journals, as people think that some of the journals are not doing the peer review work, and they are only coming for the article processing charges into this business model. So they want to have a quality control in this. And like this, many initiatives are happening, and under this scientific advisor office, they have given under the DBT DST and DST only, Center for Policy Researchers in across the country, and they are all talking about the science, and especially on the open science. And recently a conference was held for the South Asia, and there were very good deliberations on how to force alliance and to talk about open science and get benefited. These are some initiatives and enabling environment which is happening. This is from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Sridhar. We are so fast running out of time. My intent was to sort of add an African dimension to the speaker, so we could answer these questions a little bit more broadly. And I'll just try and do that very quickly. So there have already been some comments from Susan Murray from African Journals Online, who has had extensive experience with open access publishing in Africa. But I wanted to talk about what the research networks are doing and how we are trying to contribute to open access and open science. So you have to remember our context. We were spending most of our time providing the network connectivity and sort of the data centers and cloud, and that was in focus up till recently, say 5 or 6, 7 years ago. So we're late starters in this. But what we realized is what's been highlighted already as well, that there were a number of challenges. So there were the usual technology and funding challenges, but there was also a capacity issue in people. So I see Claudia has mentioned lack of awareness. So that'd be one of the questions would come up for the panel. But what we have decided to do as regional networks was to sort of see if we could support communities of practice to start to have conversations that provided this transition to open science. There's already some activity going on with open access, not as much as Indonesia and some other countries, but I think maybe Susan might speak to that. So we have managed to create this initiative called LibSense, which I can put a link into the chat later, that works on 3 different levels. So on one level, we are trying to use policy to engage stakeholders that should be involved, government, funders, other stakeholders, and use that as a way of increasing the awareness about open access and open science and what we should do to move towards it. In our native role as infrastructure providers, we're also providing infrastructure to sort of enable these policies. So this is ranging from, working with the national research networks and library associations, where there are challenges with technology to provide shared platforms. Just like in the Indonesian example, we are working with there's an organization called RUFORUM in Africa, which is an association of 140 odd agricultural universities. Now, the idea is to be able to work with them in a demonstrator that demonstrates, a data repository and how the universities could connect to it. So the issues are similar across the region. I take the point of the discussion that Claudia was having with Susan. Yes, there are different political contexts. Our governments do not readily fund like they do in other regions, but I think the focus of the research networks is what somebody referred to as society publications, community-run infrastructure, that's governed by the community as well. So we've been looking at ways in which we stimulate that. For awareness, we have this notion of open science roadmaps. This basically sort of events like you just mentioned, Sridhar, where all the stakeholders within a country come together to discuss these issues. We've had a number of them in different countries in Africa. The next ones, we have one this later in October, mid of October in Ghana, and towards the end of November in Botswana. So I thought I would introduce that before we sort of open the floor to questions. So if all the panelists can just sort of come back on with video. And I'll take the first question that I see in the Q&A. So is it possible to take a single unified approach to making publishing open access more accessible and equitable across the global South? Are there any actions that could be taken that would benefit researchers in both Indonesia and Brazil, for example? Or do our solutions always need to be adapted to the regional and local context and needs? So,
if you may have a short answer, which, well, there are 2 main problems, funding and multilingualism in many of these countries. But if you look at Cielo, and I'll type afterwards the site, it has created an open access publication model that it's adopted by journals in Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Ecuador, Mexico, Paraguay, Peru, Portugal, South Africa, Spain, Uruguay. It's now being extended to the West Indies and Venezuela, okay? And this is a multi-country network of open access publications that follow the same kind of protocol. So this is possible, okay? At least it has been proven possible across 16 countries.
I wonder if there's any of the other panelists who has anything to add to that.
Yeah, from my side, from Indonesia itself, as Dominic said, that we have the most index published journals in Deutsch, and also we also one of the most users for OJS, Open Journal Systems. So it will be very useful to support open access, especially for published articles. And also because we use Dataverse, we use a plugin, Dataverse plugin, for connecting published articles or manuscript from OJS, Open Journal System, to our data repository. So it will be very helpful for having a standardized like plugin or API to make sure that it is integrated.
I'll also echo what your friend was saying, that the open journal systems is the one non-commercial way to bring open access into the reality. But I say there is an issue about the capacity building. Not many are been trained how to install and then take it upgrades, all these things, though the community is working towards that. But there are some issues because not many have taken the OJS here, but who has taken it, they are having a good, wonderful results. Their data can be nicely taken out for the metadata harvesting, and they don't need to manually do anything. It's all done. Once it is published, your data is everywhere in the internet.
Thank you, Sridhar. So that's, but does that also apply when it comes to data and the services that you build on data? Is there any, would that be contextual? Because that's what we are finding, that quite often the needs for community in the NUF, global NUF, don't necessarily translate to our local experiences in Africa. Maybe because of where we are at, or maybe because of what we actually need. So I was wondering, when you talk about open access, does that also, in terms of open science in general, does it apply?
Yeah, well, many of the research, I take this, many of the researchers or any other thing, when it comes to data, they are very shy to share the data. They are happy to put their articles, but much of the data is still with them. And there are data repository softwares can be taken, and the government platforms which we are talking, that is only talking about the government data, that again under the 3-tier models, where some of the data is priced. They want to monetize the data, so that's why like very cautiously they are opening up. So not everything is openly available, but the efforts are being made to this. And here there comes like not the softwares or the money, but capacity building and the culture of sharing the data has to be inculcated. So that is, if we can do that one, I think we will be establishing a open knowledge.
Thank you. Claudia, quickly, because we do have one.
Yeah, quickly. Data is still something that requires cultural differences. And preparing data to be published is very hard. It's even harder than writing a paper, okay? Yeah. And people are not willing to go through that work if they're not recognized. And another issue is there are lots of legal constraints about sharing data that do not go across countries. Yeah. Okay, so you cannot transfer nowadays some research data from Europe to the United States because of GDPR. You cannot share data within South America because of different data privacy laws. Therefore, repositories become closed. Those that were open have been closed. This is just a remark, okay?
Yeah, so it probably suggests that there's going to be a need for like authentication that can be geolocated. Right, but we have a couple more minutes. There's one question I want to ask, and this is to every member of the panel. And please, if you can just answer as quickly as possible, if you've got an answer. What are the top 2 most critical enabling factors that have directly resulted in progress in open science and open knowledge efforts in your countries? So if you can just give us two factors as briefly as you can. If I start with you, Claudia.
financial support from, at least in São Paulo, the state funder that said that it would only fund research if data and open science is practiced. And the second is advocacy through training, presentations, and so on.
Thank you, Claudia. I saw Rennie and Sridhar nodding. So are you agreeing? Do you have any additional factors to add to that before we sort of round up?
Yeah, I want to echo in Claudia too. So the two key factors is like bottom up and top down approaches. So it's a collective work. So we need to do it together. Thank you.
Yeah, I also add the same. It is though it's more in India, I say that it is the community which has come forward for this thing, and they could influence the government to adopt some policies towards this. So it is the individual community members who are into this field.
In Bangladesh, it is really hard to establish data, open data, especially for the scientists. They have their mindset that, it is how we share our data. So except policy, I think it is really hard. Policy and financial support, both are needed.
Thank you very much, all of you. My experience, or rather our experience in Africa, at least with LibSense, is the same. It is also one of the reasons why we have this National Open Science Roadmap activity. The idea is to sensitize government and sensitize funders as to where the synergies might lie and what we can do together. Well, we have come to the end of this session. I would like to remind you that the conversations can continue to go on. I see Bernie has put a message in the chat. You can continue the conversations on the conference Slack if you wish to. With the next session, we'll follow a break, a 15-minute break. The next session is a keynote session with digital bundles, creating a new space for indigenous knowledge that moves beyond open access publishing. You can stay connected or come back using the same link. So for all the attendees who have been listening and engaging, we also thank you very much and look forward to seeing you in the next session. Thank you.